Thank you, Joyce. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today. Oh, sure. Those skill sets completely grounded me and created who I am today. First of all, I was an elite gymnast. That's a ranking to say elite. And I trained for the Olympics. I did not make the Olympics, but I was the number one recruited gymnast my senior year in high school. So I was able to go to college on a full ride. I chose the University of Pittsburgh. But I had a very non-traditional way of growing up. I got out of school after I took my honors classes at around 11:30, and my mother would drive me to the gym a half an hour away, and I'd spend 4 to 6 hours training. And my parents were both in education, so there was no sliding on my academics. And I had a beautiful grandmother who lived with me, and she was always pushing us. And I remember once getting a 99 on a test, and she said in her Latvian accent, "And why not 100?" Right? So this is the environment that I grew up in, both in my home and in the gym. And so when you come home at night and you have to then start studying and learn great self management skills, how do you optimize your performance holistically, right? And we work with people in organizations where it's not just about work, it's you as the whole, because work and life flow into each other, and those skill sets of self management, everything from what you put in your body to how you sleep to how you organize your day makes you strong and resilient and able to perform your best. And those are a lot of those skills that I learned growing up in the gym. Yes, wonderful. Hmm. Mm. Hmm. Yes, it's not what I would consider healthy, and it doesn't build resilience, as we know. And I agree with you. And there's been many times as a parent as well, where my children. I remember one situation where one of my children said, "Hey, I got to enroll in the SATs for my SATs," and asked me to do it. And I said, "If you can go to college, you can go on the platform and enroll. Here's the credit card, whatever you need." And she said, "But everybody else's mom or everybody else's dad does it for them." And that's where I said, and again, going back to some of those things you learn in the home, one of the wonderful things that my mom taught me was the greatest gift you can give your children is independence, right? To make them strong and to be able to function, because, and as my father would say, no one goes through this world unscathed. And so there is going to be crisis and trauma and setbacks. And it's not that they're not going to happen, and you can't control those, but you can control through your mindset and your work ability how to get through those things. So a lot of it, I believe, is how you think, right? And going back to my athletics background, it was very clear to me. And as I've worked with athletes at all stages as well, in collegiate programs and professional athletes, is that there are so many talented people out there, but the differentiation between optimal performance and being talented is that mind and hard work combination that the people excel have, right? So for sure, for sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why should I work 40 hours? That's too much. Mm-hmm. For sure. True enough. For sure. Right. And I wouldn't completely generalize that, right? Because I see people in all generations who are, as we would say, rock stars, or, have superior performance. But I do think there is a downward trend, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And so, one of the things that we work with leaders is first to understand themselves and have the self awareness of where they're coming from, where their strengths and challenge areas are, how to get them to perform optimally so they can be the best leader for organizations. And so that's a really great starting point, is that self-awareness. How do they maybe present differently? So many times you hear from leaders, well, this is how I would respond to that situation. And that's why I say, well, that's why you're in a leadership role and maybe not in this entry level individual contributor role. And so it really is getting some perspective and understanding where the challenges of our new workforce is and how we can take what we've learned and be able to translate and transform what we're seeing. Because you're right, there is a huge deficit. We've heard from CEOs that they're implementing AI because they can't find the talent and the resiliency and the skill sets they need from the humans. And that's petrifying, right? So we do need to tool our every level in the organization on how to be strong, resilient, work hard. We talk a lot, even at Compass, we try to normalize failure. I don't want my team failing on the same thing over and over again. That's what I'm not asking for. But our performance recap is a celebration of what they tried and did differently and excelled in. And then I want to know, where did you fail? Because if you're not failing, that means that you're not trying hard enough. You're not pushing yourself. Because if you've been in environments where, no, no, we're going to protect you, we don't want you to fail, no one has to know that they came last on the team. And so, like you said, everybody gets the award. We're not putting up scores. We're trying to take people away from that environment, bringing them into where you will not have a competitive advantage if you don't compete and excel in the workplace. How do we get them to shift their mindset? How do we make it okay to compete and win and want to be part of a winning team? It feels good to be part of a winning team. How do we start changing cultures to be able to make that happen? Mm-hmm. Correct. Right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Correct. Well, when we do a lot of work taking very uncohesive teams, executive teams, leadership teams, and making them cohesive. And you're right, the first thing we work on is trust. After we've done the self awareness and they've taken assessments to understand who they are, how they come across, how to be other centered rather than self centered, it is about trust. And in all relationships, whether it's we're talking about trust with your partner and the people that you love and your family and your friends, those are the same skills and the same principles that apply to being a trusted leader and a trusted leadership team. So is your team able to be vulnerable and say, I made a mistake? Do they know where they are on the accountability ladder to say, I was not accountable, I missed a deadline, that's unacceptable? You know, we talk about this all the time. You know, we as leaders are in a fishbowl, right? And we're swimming around, and our teams, you can put out the most beautiful communications and have this great communications and marketing department, but if you're not living what you're preaching about trust and how we deal with conflict in the workplace, um, then they know, you know, they're observing us every single day by our actions. We know this during the pandemic, right? You talk about culture transformation. At Compass, we define culture as the acceptable behaviors in an organization. So conversely, it's also the unacceptable behaviors, right? And people posted core values in their employee manuals and they're on the conference room walls, and that all sounded really great until the pandemic hit. And then corporations were making leadership teams, because that's what a corporation is. It's just a group of humans, right, with some paperwork. We're making decisions not based on those values which define the culture. And we know how disengaged our workplace became when a lot of the leaders did not make decisions based on what we said is our culture. So all these pieces start tying together. But what we also know from the research is that if you don't have a relationship with trust, then it is very difficult to be able to resolve conflict effectively, right? And so that's why we always start with that baseline of the skill sets to build trust. And we use different models. With one group, we might talk about Pat Lencioni's triangle and all the pieces that create trust. We might use Brene Brown's braving model. All these great theories all lend and have the same common things that we need to be able to do to get people to want to follow us, whether it is as a parent in the home or being a good, solid friend or as a leader in the workplace. Mm-hmm. Sure. Hmm. Absolutely. Right. Well, again, we're in that fishbowl and we take our cues from that. And so if they're working nonstop and irritable, then we're supposed to work nonstop. And then it's acceptable behavior to be irritable. So at Compass, we're always trying to reinforce, look at yourself in the mirror first. And a lot of the burnout and the exhaustion isn't just work related, right? Like things happen in our home. We're taking care of sick people. We have children. We might be in that sandwich generation. There's so many things that pull. We may not be healthy, right? So when we're working with, and we call them corporate athletes, our leaders, our executives, we are first looking at how are they taking care of themselves. And we do a self-management model in any of our executive tracks or coaching, which is about how are you sleeping? What are you putting in your mouth? Well, how are you moving? How are you engaging your brain? So how do you disconnect from work and explore so that you stay relevant and you are recharging? Are you actually going out on vacation and disconnecting? All of these good habits that you need so that you can perform optimally. So we start with each individual first. And that looks very different for different executives, right? Like it's never, even say, for example, if we're talking about time management, somebody might have problems setting goals, but another person might have trouble saying no, right? So even though the symptoms to an employee can look the same about the leader, we need to really dig down into that individual level to figure out how they can perform optimally and take good care of them. And a lot of it is having the courage to say no, right? So we tend to want to take on the world. So teaching executive strong delegation skills, having them be the courage to say no. What should I always say goals are so great because they tell us what to do, but more importantly, tell us what not to do, right? Which is really critical. So we're teaching all these skills to help someone to reduce that overburden stress. Do you not trust your team because you are controlling, right? And only you can do it the right way? Or do you not trust your team because you know the right people on the team and you haven't addressed problems, right? So again, there's so many ways to try to really get to that individual why to help change that. But when we see burnout, there's so many different reasons for it. And a lot of times it is about either getting the person to admit it and have the self-awareness so that they can get the help they need. Sometimes the help isn't at work. Sometimes they need to go see a doctor. Sometimes they need to see a therapist. Sometimes they just need to put on the calendar that they're going to do something for themselves. And it's okay. Sure. Yes. We, mm-hmm, sure. Right. Great. Good. Yeah, we always say at Compass that you're a corporate athlete, except unlike professional athletes, you don't get an off season, right? So it makes it even harder. And also, it's 24/7. And what differentiates, I think, a lot of athletics versus being in corporate America is being without wins, right? So I'm always trying to get leaders to celebrate wins, break up the year, because if you are always practicing, which is going to work every day, and not getting feedback, it is exhausting. And so at least they get games to see how they're doing, how they're performing. So we have to create those environments as well in the workplace. Um, yeah, sure. Oh, thank you. Well, they can reach out to, if you go to our website, wearecompass.com. I'm Alisa at wearecompass.com, just like We Are Penn State, which my youngest attends. wearecompass.com, and you can see all the things that we do for our clients. But we talked about sometimes it's really hard to make mistakes. We work with Department of Defense clients, for example. And so in what they do, they can't make a mistake, right? You can't put a nuclear component on a submarine and make a mistake. And so it is hard then to say, I'm going to keep my people accountable, but not 100% be in control. So that trust issue is really difficult. And I think trying to help leaders to know when they have the judgment of when do you need to make sure that you are accountable, because as we say to our leaders, and we're working with an executive team in an offsite shortly here, and there's a slide on this whole thing about when you are an executive team or a leader, all the good things, the applause goes to your team, right? But when things don't go well, that is when we, as the executives, and especially the CEO of an organization, has to say, what did I do incorrectly? What it all rolls back to us, the highest level. We always say the fish rots from the head down. And so that CEO is ultimately responsible. We're working with a really fabulous president of a university, and he was also concerned, and we know academia has been no picnic over the last couple of years for many, many reasons that we won't get into on this podcast. But of course, there could be a lot of burnout in that environment. And so one of the workshops we did was the CEO working with the rest of the cabinet to determine what are the acceptable behaviors and unacceptable behaviors. What happens when we go on paid time off? Can we really leave? Do we need to be checking? What really happens if I want to take a walk during the day or roll out my yoga mat? Is that acceptable? Is that not acceptable? We really work with our team at Compass to make sure that we have all these appropriate norms so that we can build the culture and the resiliency that we want. One of the things that we've done, Joyce, and I think we've been talking a little bit about this in snippets here, is protecting our team from isolation, which creates intense burnout. And so we have goals at Compass. First of all, we have unlimited paid time off, but you have to take a certain amount of paid time off during the year at intervals, because we want you to go away. We are a competent team. We've got your back. You go recharge. That's really critical for us, because a lot of times with an unlimited PTO, people actually, the research say, take less time away. So we want to say, no, no, we trust you as adults. You're professionals, but make sure that you are taking care of yourself. The other goal that we set up, because we have a lot of consultants around the country and we don't get to work, we do a lot of this, Zoom, Teams, right, during the day, and we're not always on site with a client in person. And so we have requirements of how many times they have to be sort of back at the mothership with Compass, working with their teammates and their clients to make sure we have that interaction with humans and it's not just a screen. So I'm always really concerned about isolation when it comes to burnout. And Gallup has a great question on their engagement survey. Who's your best friend at work? People don't like that question. It's really a critical question. It means who's that person you can love and trust on your team when things go wrong or you want to celebrate? And so, how do we build that into organizations? All these things to try to help people perform their best. Hmm. Interesting. Yes. Sure. Hmm. Sure. Regarding the spiritual component, first of all, I am very strong in my Jewish faith, and that grounds me. That is my compass when we talk about compass, right? There's so many great teachings that are personal to me. When it comes to our clients, we meet them where they are. And so some of our clients, they're faith-based nonprofit organizations, and that's really critical. There's other clients that is something that we don't address, and that's okay too. But I do remember working, coaching an executive, and I was having a really difficult time pressing the right buttons with this one individual. And I could not get her to change her leadership thought process. And I found a great book. She was very strong in her Christian faith. And I found a great leadership book that was based on that. That pushed that button for that individual. So when we talk about, and we call it the wheel. I love how you say anchors, whether it's financial, educational, spiritual, family. That pie looks different for everybody, right? For some people, spiritual is an enormous pie that speaks to them, and we do that all the time when we do the artifact exercise with our teams, where they go around and tell what's really important. We just did it with this one organization. One person talked about this piece of the Berlin Wall and their German history, and another person talked about a Christian Bible that went with them all the way on every deployment they had when they were in the military. So we open to what is it that makes you as a human but it's not spiritual for everybody or the same amount of spirituality. And I think that's really important when we customize our work to really help people. For some people, I say, for example, they need to see a therapist and talk it through. For other people, they need to work out and do yoga, or they need to be in nature, right? Like, I think it's so interesting with optimal performance. It's about what works for that individual. Joyce, and you will never find the same person as you, right? And so what is it that makes that person unique, and how do we unlock that performance using what is important to them, their priorities in that different stages of life, right? So that changes as we go through life's challenges as well, right? So yes. 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 Oh, thank you. Well, I want to like sort of pull what you just said because I find it so interesting, and that is about purpose, right? We work with a lot of organizations to figure out what is the purpose. And in some organizations, it's so mission based, it's so easy to say what the purpose is. And that's really important for recruiting corporate athletes, right? You better figure out what that purpose is. But we also work on leadership brands. So the corporation will hopefully have a strong purpose, and you have to find that. And then what's your leadership brand? What is the purpose that you want to bring to work every day? How do you want to be known? And we walk people through an exercise to do that. So exactly that every day they can also make decisions based on who they are, their why, and stay true and trusted. So bringing all these pieces that we had the joy of talking about today, all these are interwoven. It's not right. It's not like individual things. They all come together. And I love that you talk about purpose on a global level within your organization, and then finding that leadership purpose and why for yourself too. And that goes for leaders. Again, doesn't mean that you have the title of manager, director, executive, VP, right? We are all leaders. And so, how do we all want to show up in every aspect of our life? Because there's not just a work you and a home you, we're just one messy, imperfect, perfect person. And to have that grace for ourselves and for others. So, yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Oh, it was an honor. Thank you for having me so much. It was a great conversation, Joyce.